Well, I would love to tell you that this is the machine that I've been working on, but it isn't. This is actually the machine that served as a donor for the machine that I ended up moving through all the stages of getting finalized. And I've got to tell you something. My finalization process is extremely detailed. And so for any of you that have sent machines and you hear that your machine is on the workbench, that's a good thing. But it doesn't mean that you're super duper close to the finish line, because I have so many steps and so many verifications and so many reviews of the machine and evaluations of the machine and adjustments on the machine and timing on the machine and aesthetics on the machine and electrical on most machines, not this one obviously. So all I can say is your patience is appreciated up front. This is one of the two machines that Peggy Ann Gamma, like the Ray, brought to me. And this machine that was born back in 1911, it was presupposed that this machine would serve as a donor or a surrogate for the 1922 machine that you'll see in a little bit. So all the roughness that you saw on this 1911 machine when the premiere opened was indicative of the 1922 as well. Both machines were in a rough state. And it's been a long road, but I think you'll agree once you see the unveiling of the 1922, which again has parts from this 1911, that long road was worth it. I hope you agree. I hope you agree that it was worth it. So one of the things I wanted to open up with and share is, some of you may have wondered over time, okay, we've seen Model 66 machines on this channel before. The one right in front of you right now, this 1911, and certainly the 1922 that you're going to see shortly, are 66-1s. And again, it's because of that unique way that presser foot attachment is mounted on the rear of the presser foot bar. But when did the first when did the first 66 roll out of the factory? When did it come onto the scene? Some of you may be saying, I already know that answer. Well, if you do, type it in the chat. and I'll send you something special. You only got like about 5-10 seconds, so if you don't know, you don't know. But I can tell you that it rolled out 117 years ago this month. 117 years ago this month, the first Singer Model 66 rolled off of the assembly line. Do you have it yet? I don't see it. Is it out there? All right. If you didn't get it, you didn't get it, and that's fine. We're talking about 1902. 1902 is when the first Singer Model 66 rolled off of the assembly line. And you might be saying, well, is there anything significant about that particular year? What happened back in 1922? Excuse me, 1902. What happened back in 1902 are a couple of things. And I'll share them with you real quick. So, not within our country necessarily, but King Edward VII was crowned King of Great Britain. He introduces the Order of Merit for those who excel in science, art, and literature. Alfonso the 13th becomes King of Spain. The new vacuum cleaner is showcased while preparing Westminster Abbey before the King's coronation. The end of the Boer War. That's tricky to say. The end of the Boer War, which was tied to United South Africa and the Commonwealth status. Cuba gains independence from the USA. The Tyrannosaurus Rex bones are found in Montana, USA. Arthur Balfour becomes Prime Minister of Great Britain. The invention of a sheet glass drawing machine allows mass production of windows. Great Britain signs alliance with Japan. The peasant revolt in the Ukraine and Volga region. Radium is isolated as a pure metal by Pierce and Marie Curie. There's an earthquake in Guatemala and volcanoes erupt in Martinique, St. Vincent, Japan, and Nicaragua, killing thousands. U.S. President Teddy Roosevelt refuses to kill a captive bear on a hunt. This creates a fashion for teddy bear toys. And last but not least, and there's a lot more that happened back in the great year of 1902 when the first Model 66 rolled off the assembly line, gold is discovered in Nevada and Alaska. I've got more than that. I've got a lot more than that I could share. But let's just say that it was a very busy year along with the first Model 66 rolling off the assembly line for Singer. So let's do this, because I want to eventually migrate from 1902, which is again when the first Model 66 rolled off the assembly line 117 years ago this month. But we have to focus now no longer on this 1911 that so graciously and generously donated the needed parts so that the 1922 Singer Model 66 that belongs to Peggy Ann can now take the spotlight. But first of all, we have to show you from whence we came. So let me zoom in. And again, for you YouTubers that don't do Facebook, if I didn't take the time to do this, because all my Facebook people have already seen this. But I don't want to exclude those on YouTube that for whatever reason still in this great year of 2019 don't have a page on Facebook. They don't have a presence on Facebook. And I understand all the arguments for not doing it, but there's a lot more arguments for doing it. One of which is you get to see all the cool progress shots that I post there of the machines that I've taken through my very unique and detailed process. All right, so let's get over to Facebook, and I'm going to see if I can walk you through that. So the first picture you're seeing there on the landing page, on the left you've got the 1911 that we focused on opening up this premiere. The 1911 again is the donor machine that Peggy Ann brought to me. On the right we've got the 1922 that is the finalized product that Peggy Ann will soon be picking up at the workshop here in Oconto, Wisconsin. And like I said, neither one of these machines was the cat's meow as far as being mechanically and otherwise ready to get the job done. So now we're looking at that 1922 that became the finalized machine that I'm going to present shortly. And again, I get it. The decal work looks pretty good, but when you look at some of the close shots, not in this first group of photos, but the second group, you're going to be like, you can't judge a book by its cover, because if you don't really focus in on that cover, you might be missing stuff. And that happens certainly for folks that end up buying machines on eBay and other places like that from non-proven sources. So now I just clicked, and now we're looking at that 1911 model that opened up this premiere. So that is the balance wheel that you're looking at there with all the pitted rust, not on the 1911 that served as the donor machine, but on the 1922. Again, I discovered a lot of rust on both of these machines, which tells me they probably were stored in an environment that wasn't controlled, an environment that allowed moisture to get to them and allowed this degradation of both machines, not just the donor machine, also the machine from 1922. So here we're looking at the back of the 1922 model. Again, you're not going to be able to see some of the close-up stuff that I'll show you in the second set of photos that'll really give you a clear picture of how far gone both of these machines were. There you're seeing kind of both machines together. The one closest to the camera is the 1922. You can see the balance wheel of the 1911. And I would love to have cut corners and save time by being able to simply take the balance wheel off of the 1911 and put it onto the 1922, but it wasn't compatible. I'll say it again, it wasn't compatible. So if you ever are looking for parts for your Model 66, be real careful. Some parts are readily transferable over, some are not. The main drive shaft on the 1911 was substantially longer than the 1922, and so the balance wheel just simply wouldn't work on it. So there's the faceplate of the 1922. Not in horrible condition, but it still had rust, particularly on the back portion of the faceplate, and you'll see that in some of the other shots that I will share with you. Excuse me. And here we're looking at the rear of the 1911. Just again, you can see right away the quality of the decaling on the 1911 is significantly worse off than the 1922 model. You can kind of see that towards the bottom there on the rear of the bed. There's the faceplate and kind of looking down the machine on the 1911. Again, my druthers, my wish will be that eventually this 1911 will also be restored. I don't think that's a goal or objective of Peggy Ann. Peggy Ann wanted to simply have one working machine, and so that'll potentially be a project I take on myself. Here again, we're looking at the 1911, and just gives you a shot of the upper tension area. More shots of the 1911, and again, you can just see readily decaling on this machine has gotten hit a lot harder than the 1922, which is why we ended up going the direction of restoring the 1922. Aesthetically, it was much less of a challenge. But still quite a bit of work on it as well, and you'll see that in the second set of shots. Here we're looking at the right side of the 1911. Again, this is the machine that served as the donor. Both machines have similar bobbin winding systems, and you'll see that in the additional shots. Just a more distant shot of the 1911 Singer Model 66. And again, look at that balance wheel. That balance wheel on this 1911 was just, it was such a contrast to the rest of the machine. It was almost perfect. I mean, it needed a little bit of polishing and very, very soft cleanup, but compared to the other one that had that pitted rust on it that I showed you a little bit ago, it was a gorgeous balance wheel. And now we're looking at the 1922, looking kind of towards the faceplate, across the front of the machine, towards the upper tension. And the upper tension on the 1922 was an absolute mess. You'll see that in some of the other photos. And again, it just evidenced all the exposure that both of these machines had to damp elements that really caused a lot of degrading of the machines. There we're looking at the Singer emblem and also the stitch length controller, which is this little knob right here. And then we're looking at some of the decaling on this 1922. Nice looking, nice looking. Again, it needed a fair amount of cleanup and work. And even here you can see some of that rust on the stitch length controller that I had to work on as well. Beautiful decal in the center of the bed on this 1922. That really was a refreshing thing for a machine of that vintage. And here we're looking at obviously the raceway area, and you're looking again at that presser foot and the presser foot shaft that has rust all over it. I'll see if I can zoom in just a little bit so you can see it more readily. Even up into here. But that's all rust. And this is the machine that I ended up restoring for Peggy Ann. So you can see it was not pristine. It was not without needs and issues. And there's a stark contrast there of that center filigree decal on the 1911 compared to the one you just saw a little bit ago on the 1922. That would not be something that could be readily restored. It would have to be removed. The machine would have to be stripped, repainted, re-decaled, and clear coated, which we were able to avoid, thankfully, because the decals were in overall very good shape on the 1922. And there we're just looking at the faceplate area. That's going to be the 1911 model again. And again, if I go back real quick, look at the presser foot area on the 1911. And again, we're talking a machine that is almost decades older than the 1922. And yet look at that presser foot, look at the presser foot shaft. It's virtually clear of debris, rust, and sediment or anything like that. It's a good looking presser foot attachment, and also the presser foot bar as well. I think we already looked at that, didn't? Oh, I went backwards. Duh. And I think we're full circle, I believe. Yeah, we've seen all this before. That's the 1922 there in the shot. So let me see if I can move us over to the other set of pictures that I really am anxious to share with you. Here you can really see the evidence of the rusting, and again, this is the machine that was restored. Look at the faceplate. You can't even see all of it because it's on the rear of the machine. Look at the rust there on the take-up arm. Look at the tension control up here. And it was even worse on the inside. That's all rust. That's not just varnish or caramelized oil or anything like that. That's all rust. Here you can see more evidence of that rust right there as well. So this machine, you know, pretty decals. Again, you've got to be careful as a consumer. If you see a machine that has pretty decals, just realize that's only the cover of the book. And you might have some real big surprises coming your way if you don't scrutinize that machine more carefully. There we're looking at the raceway area. Again, this is on the 1922. And I believe that's after I did a little bit of cleaning, believe it or not. But you can just see it's just a mess. And that's not just from sewing. That's from this machine being, again, exposed to an environment that had dirt, dust, filth. Even down here in the raceway, that's all caked around the edges. Can you see that? So yeah, it's just, and then this is again not the donor machine. This is the machine I ended up restoring. So it was not a cakewalk at all. There again is a shot of that balance wheel on the 1922, and you can see I have it leaning against the bed area of the machine, and you can see that that pitted rust is, I mean, it went around the entire wrap of the wheel. There again, we're looking at the raceway area. It just crudded up and filthy. There's a better shot of the faceplate. Again, this is on the 1922. We kind of zoom in. You can look at that presser foot bar number 1, caked in rust. Here on the rear of the faceplate, you can really see, I'll come out just a little bit, that's rust all the way up the edge of the faceplate area, and there was rust on the inside as well. Rust usually, as all of you know, it migrates from the inside out, and so here you can see even on the needle bar, we've got rust down there as well on this 1922 that belongs to Peggy Ann. Okay, we took the faceplate cover, blah, 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 blah. We took the faceplate cover off, and here in the shot as I kind of move from the bottom up, you can see again the rust on the presser foot lever on the back. You can see it on the needle bar, and then we get all kinds of fun surprises on the inside of the faceplate area as well. And it's not just dusty and dirty. I mean, it was crudded up to a point where it was actually restricting the movement of that needle bar up and down. So again, this was the better of the two machines, if you can imagine. And this stuff here, this caramelized oil, this varnishing, has almost created a pattern on the rear of the machine, just to the left of the faceplate area. All of that junk needed to come off in order to get the final product that you'll see after we get done with these series of photos. There's the bed area, and this is again on the 1922. It's got so much crud that's embedded in the filigree and decals, embedded in the paint. It was a major effort to try to get it restored back. And again, the final product you're going to see is a 1922 Singer Model 66 that was not repainted. The final product you're going to see was not repainted. I had to go through a very detailed cleaning and debrising process, and then eventually take it through several phases of clear coating in order to try to restore the beauty of Peggy Ann's 1922 Singer 66. Just look at that stuff. That's almost like it's almost like barnacles on a ship. It digs into the pigment of the paint, and it hangs on for dear life. And especially, it's all over the decaling. Especially as you're going over the decaling and such, you have to do it with so much gentleness and so much intentional caution that otherwise the result is you're going to totally destroy the decals, and then you're at a point where you're going to have to repaint the machine and start from scratch. And you can see it's not just an isolated area. On the rear of the machine here, on the side of the machine, all of that stuff had to be removed from Peggy Ann's 1922 Singer 66. And it is any of you that have ever done similar cleanup on a machine, you already know how painstakingly and difficult it is, and how time consuming it is as well. So here we're looking at that upper tension again. It almost looks not utterly terrifying from the front, although you can still see all the rust all over this upper tension. And again, it looked just as bad on the inside when I disassembled it. So here you're just seeing more of that nasty varnishing and caramelized oil all over, like a cancer really, on Peggy Ann's 1922 Model 66. It was everywhere. So here we're starting to gradually take this down layer by layer. It's not really super evident at this point. You can still see all along here. You can still see across the top. There's a lot of work to be done. Look at the rust even on that thread spool pin. It's rusted all the way around. And you can see all the way across. You have that caramelized oil and varnishing all over the machine, on the decals and filigree, embedded in the paint. It's everywhere, like a cancer. So once again, there was rust even on the faceplate. You saw that in the shots a little bit ago. And here I've taken it through a process of trying to restore the luster and the finish on that faceplate. It's such a central focus point on a Model 66, especially when you get the nice scroll design ones, that really had to be a focus area in bringing this machine back to its glory. And here I've gone through there using dental tools, using a whole box of Q-tips, and a combination of cleaning and stripping old oil out, and properly lubricating the machine as well, and just trying to get that machine back to where it needs to be. You'll also see I've started to make a dent on the presser foot take up there that was just covered in rust, trying to get all the rust off the machine. Rust like a cancer if you don't get all of it off of the machine, depending on how the machine is stored or where it's stored. You could have a revisit of that again. So here I'm down in the raceway area, such a central part of the machine, and I'm using some of my dental tools to get all of that junk and crud out of there. So we've got a nice area for that thread to do its magic. There you can see it's looking a lot better. I'm still chipping away at it. Even here you can see the rust on the little release that pops the bobbin up, so you can change out bobbin thread on the Model 66. There I've used a special solvent that's safe for paint, safe for decals, to break down the crud on that raceway even more. Again, you can get so much with dental tools, you can get so much with Q-tip swabs, but a lot of that stuff is out of view and it's tucked in there, and you've got to break it down, you've got to wash it away and get a nice clean surface that can then be get a light coat of oil on it. Continuing to work on that area. One of the most key parts of the machine, because that's where all the magic happens, with the stitches being created and the needle and everything doing its work. And there we're adding some special lubricant to protect it from rusting again. Here I'm using a special wire type attachment on my drill to try to freshen up the ability to read the serial number on this machine. It had so much varnish and so much junk on it, I had to literally use a magnifying glass to read it before I cleaned it up. And obviously you have to be extremely careful if you take a track like this, because one slip of that high-speed drill with this wire brush on the end and you're going to be taking chunks of your decals off. Here I'm just kind of getting ready to wipe away the serial number. And now you can see that it's actually readable. I didn't want to remove all of the varnishing, so I left a little bit on the edges just to give it authenticity and to evidence the fact that it was an older machine. I mean, it's from 1922, right? So it's been around for a while. Here we're over by the bobbin winder. The bobbin winder on these machines, because of the way it swivels and works, there's so many nooks and crannies and areas that have to be cleaned. All the varnish, all the dirt, all the caramelized oil, all the junk has to be removed from that area so that that bobbin winder system is going to work correctly. Here we're starting to really go after that balance wheel. Remember again, that balance wheel was just coated in rust, was pitted with rust, and there was a lot of work that had to be done to try to get a nice finish back for that machine. Here we're starting to work on the body of the machine and I'm removing the varnishing, the caramelized oil, wicking all of that dirt up, and just trying to get a painted surface that is something that I can then clear coat and can get a decent final product. Again, it's not going to be a Brad quality product like that machine that is the first one you see on my Facebook page, the one that I sent to Tennessee, because with Brad's I stripped it all the way down the metal, brand new paint, brand new decals, brand new clear coat, and that is just, Brad's is just a museum quality machine. I think you'll be impressed with where I took Peggy Ann's machine too, but again, you'll be looking at original paint on Peggy Ann's machine when I unveil it. It's not a machine that's been repainted. It's been a machine that's been cleaned up, debrised, and then ultimately very, very carefully masked off and clear coated. And that's just a caution to anyone that decides that here you can really start to see that finish coming back, and this is before the clear coating process. You can really see here the luster of that paint is starting to come back. It really is starting to be able to breathe again, because all that varnishing, all that caramelized oil, all that dirt and junk, as you can see right there on the cosmetic pad, it basically just smothers that machine. And if it's left unattended long enough, it doesn't mummify the machine and protect the paint. It continues to degrade the paint and make it brittle, and you can see that on Singer machines, you can see that on Pfaff machines, where someone's had a filthy machine, they haven't done anything with it, and it just continues to degrade and degrade and degrade. It's like living in Wisconsin and never washing your car in the winter. It's a recipe for disaster. And you remember from when we just interviewed Frank Wilson, our friend from South Carolina that has been, was in the sewing machine industry from 1958 to 2017. When I asked him the question, what's the most important message to sewing machine owners that you can give them to keep their machine up to snuff, to keep it ready and doing the job as well as it can? Remember what he said? Keeping your machine clean. And not just, not like spring cleaning once a year, but after every time you sew, or at least, as often as you can, keeping that machine clean, keeping it in a real good working state. And a lot of people miss that point. As long as it's still sewing decently, they just ignore that aspect of it. And here again, you're just seeing I'm continuing to plug away, working on that machine. That's all the junk that we're getting off of it, and I went through a pile. And in the final shot, you'll see a little stack of them in front of the machine. That's about 1/6 of the cosmetic pads that I went through. And here you can see, and I had one person, and I'm not trying to be mean. I had one person that saw these shots on Facebook, and they sent me a message and said, oh, what do you use to clean your machines up? I hate to be a stick in the mud, but I can't reveal all of my secrets. I can't. But you can see the difference here contrasted on the left that has not been touched yet, and on the right where I've begun that process of layer by layer, removing all of that varnishing and dirt and junk on there. It's evident as you look at it side by side. So if you send me that question, I'll try to be as polite as I can. I do give tips and tricks on certain things, but other things I've worked so long to develop these processes and to develop these solution mixes that I use. Like I said to her on Facebook, it's kind of like the Coke recipe. If someone contacts Coke headquarters and says, hey, I really like your product, I buy it all the time, can I have the recipe? You're either going to hear a click, or you're going to hear someone laughing in the background, or you're going to probably have a long pause of silence and the person's going to say, you're joking, right? And I hate to say that, because people will sometimes scoff at that. Well, come on now. Are these really secrets? Yeah, they are. And that's why my machines, both from a performance standpoint and from a final product once they've been fully restored, are the best in the world. I can't give all those secrets away. And that's just, it is what it is. So there you're looking at that frontal shot I talked about with all those, that little stack of cosmetic pads. And again, that is a tiny little sampling. Take that times 6 or 7, and that's how many cosmetic pads I went through to get the machine to this point. And you know what? Remember how it looked? And look at it in this shot. That in and of itself is impressive in my estimation. It's very impressive. But it might get better than that. You never know. So here what I'm starting to do is I'm going through the for anyone that's ever had to paint something and go through that masking process of masking off all the areas that you don't want that clear coat to get into. It is a very tedious process, and it can be as time consuming as the clear coat process itself. There you can see we're masking off a very critical area, the faceplate area. I've used basically a cotton ball to block off from any clear coating getting into that area that will cause problems. I've had to mask off the raceway, the needle plate area. I've had to mask off all of these exposed areas down here by the presser foot and the needle bar, and any other part of the machine that I don't want that clear coat to get into, because it's not going to respect boundaries unless you create them. Also over here by the bobbin winder as well, you've got to create a boundary there as well to keep that clear coat from getting on areas that you don't want it to. The only area over here that I didn't mask off, because quite honestly it's a lot easier to put on a new bobbin winding tire than to try to mask off the rim basically that tire runs on. So I just left it on, sacrificed it for the cause, and then I put on a brand new bobbin winding tire on this 1922 66 that belongs to Peggy Ann. And here again, any of those oiling points that are orifices that are open to where that clear coat can get into, you've got to block that clear coat from getting in there. My easiest method is either to use some cotton, or here where the circumference is close enough, I use a Q-tip swab and I just stick it right in the hole, and it creates a boundary as far as that clear coat not getting in where I don't want it to get in. Because again, if you get clear coat on moving parts or any of the internals on a sewing machine, it's worse. It's worse than varnishing gook and other stuff that'll get on those moving parts. It's really hard to get off if you make that mistake. And so you block everything here on the rear of the machine, down here on the bed, any place that clear coat can potentially infiltrate. You create a boundary from it being able to do that. Now we're looking at the upper tension disassembled. This is before it's been cleaned and polished and restored. You'll see some close-up shots of that, I think. Again, look at the upper tension on that inner ring there. That's all rust. And that is just a small smattering of the rust that was on these critical pieces. Even this lock ring that goes on the outside of the tensioner, it's just covered in rust. That is the retaining plate that goes next to the tension discs, and you can see as well that's absolutely coated in rust. Especially on the top, it's literally pitting into the metal. So that is a happy upper tension right there. That's after I've gone through, I've used multiple steps in cleaning it. Again, you can't be overly aggressive. These alloys on this upper tension are porous to some extent, and they're also a softer metal. So you can't go at it full bore. Otherwise, you're going to end up creating burrs and rub points on there, and then when you try to sew, it's going to catch that thread, and you're going to have upper tension issues with thread breaking, thread not feeding properly. And again, from that last photo you looked at to where we started, what a contrast, huh? And it again goes to that point I was talking about. If you hear your machine is heading towards the workbench, realize with the complexity and the detail of my finalization process, where I go through every facet of the machine from bobbin to balance wheel, don't get overly excited thinking, oh, my machine's on the workbench, I'll probably have it next week. Don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath and anticipate that, okay? It's probably not gonna happen. All right, so I have to grab a little bit of a drink here. And yes, it's non-alcoholic. A little bit of coffee. And now we're finally, after you've been so patient through this process, and I'm just going to give us a little bit of music. Let's see what we have here. Yeah, that's kind of pleasant little soft ragtime style. So let's leave my dinosaur computer, which is almost as old as Peggy Ann's 1922, and let's see if we can take a first look at what we have now. And I will, other than walking into things, I will also mention to you some interesting facts about 1922. I already gave it to you on 1902. So back in 1922, when Peggy Ann's Singer Model 66 that you're about to see was born, the formation of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was established. The Lincoln Memorial was dedicated. In the UK, the Centre Court for Wimbledon was built. In Germany, there were a number of, I can't even pronounce it, Nosferatu premieres that occurred. In Ireland, there was a civil war that began. In the United States, Reader's Digest was created, and finally, last but not least, in the UK back in 1922, the British Broadcasting Company was created. I hope you find that interesting. I find it fascinating. All right, so let's unveil. Any of you that are on this premiere, if you want to do a little proverbial drum roll or brrr or something like that, that'll be cool. Waiting for the music to kind of be dramatic. So what do you think? Does Peggy Ann's 1922 Singer Model 66 look any different? Any different at all? Maybe. Maybe a little bit different. Just a little. And look at that upper tension. And the faceplate, even the faceplate from the side, you can see it. It's like, what? Is that really the same? Is that really what? What? Are you serious? Yeah, that's the same. That's the same. That is the same balance wheel right there. That was all pitted with rust, folks. Now you understand again why my finalization process takes so long. Why does it take so long? Remember this area? And again, sometimes I'll leave just a little bit of varnish on there to give it an authentic look. But that is leaps and bounds beyond where it was. Don't you agree? Just a beautiful looking 1922 Model 66 Redeye now. And again, folks, what you're looking at right now through the camera, that's the original paint. And remember how varnished, crudded up, caramelized oil, pitted on everything was on Peggy Ann's 1922 Singer Redeye, and look at it now. That is what makes my process so different than everyone else's. That attention to detail, that painstaking effort to try to honor a machine by giving it a new beginning. But okay, so Scott, we get it. You made Peggy Ann's machine pretty again. It's a pretty looking machine. But is it just going to go like on a table somewhere? Or is it going to actually sew? Are you going to actually sew with it, Scott? And by the way, how are you going to sew with it without it being in a base or a table? Because the Model 66, because of the design on the undercarriage, does not sit level on a table. It won't sit level. Well, remember my little trick, folks? These furniture moving pads, there's one right there. There's one in the rear center of the machine where the other pedestal foot is. And then there's another one underneath here. You can just see the edge of it that has a little cup opening so that that movement piece that's below the raceway can swivel back and forth very rapidly. Well, semi-rapidly as I'm turning it by hand. And it won't catch my real cool wicker little table covering there, because I love that little wicker covering. I really do. So what do you think? Did I do a good job? Claps? And no, I didn't restore all of the decaling. That's all original decaling as well. You can see where it's kind of worn down over the front of the bed there. But now Peggy Ann not only has a working machine, she's got a machine that if she decides to share it with someone, to take it somewhere, whatever, she's going to have a machine that is brag-worthy, a machine that's going to present with the original paint, the original decals, and she'll be able to be proud of it. So that's the cool part right there. Okay, blah 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 blah. All right, so let's do a little bit of sewing now with this 1922 Singer Model 66 Redeye, and I'll see if I can just play a little bit of music softly in the background. All right, so the one thing I wanted to show you, turn my screen around so I can see what you're seeing. So these were the initial sew-offs after I got done with all the work. This is a real fine stitch on the upper portion, probably about 20 stitches per inch. All these other ones are just standard, probably 5 to 6 stitches per inch. But even after I'd gone through all the cleaning on that upper tension and restored it completely, look at what that lock stitch looked like. And what I discovered is someone had replaced the upper tension release pin on Peggy Ann's upper tension, and it was too short. And so I had to press it in further to get it to work, and then it was allowing that tension to release while you were sewing. And eventually on the far side over here on this side, after replacing that pin with the appropriate one, we started to get some success. Yay. All right, blah, 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 blah. All right, so let's do a little bit of sewing, folks. And again, forgive me in advance for not being high speed and zippy here, because I'm doing this by hand, folks. I'm doing it by hand. Matter of fact, I'll widen the shot so you can watch me turn this with my finger. It's probably like cheap entertainment, but it is what it is, right? And then I'll zoom in on the shot once we're done. And on this machine, if you want to make the stitch longer, you turn this clockwise, you turn it in. And if you want to make it a shorter stitch, you turn it counterclockwise to the left, okay? So I've got it turned in right now. All right, here we go. I'd love to be done by now, but I'm not. I've got a little sore in my fingers, so it's kind of, oops, and I also just set my my bobbin winder as well. So we're sewing through, those of you that follow me carefully know that we're sewing through 2 layers of genuine elk hide right now. All I can tell you is if I had a hand crank on here, or if I had it set up in a table like a treadle, it would be absolutely easy. I'm having to work a little bit harder because I'm turning the balance wheel by hand. But it really is incredibly easy to turn this balance wheel. Even like this, it's just a little bit more laborious, obviously. All right, so all the way up. We're going to turn this around. Give this a clip, get our thread back in place, and now I will zoom in, once I clip my threads that is, zoom in so we can take a look at the stitching on this Redeye on 2 layers of genuine cowhide, not cowhide, elk hide, excuse me, genuine elk hide. Not enough coffee today. Definitely not enough coffee today. Okay, so let's go over here. And there you can see, actually let me do it like this. I think we'll be able to display it a little bit better if I give it a vertical position. I hope we can. Because those are gorgeous, gorgeous stitches, folks. So there you can see, and look at the grain of that elk hide. It's absolutely nuts. Beautiful, consistent stitching all the way up through those layers of genuine elk hide. Absolutely spectacular in every way. I'm going to turn it around so you can see the other side as well. Absolutely perfect stitching all the way up and down on this 2 layers of genuine elk hide. I'm telling you folks, if you've never sewn on a processed type hide before and you've done a lot of leather sewing, put it on your bucket list to try it, because a machine that can sew 2 layers of processed elk hide like this, I mean, it can get the job done on biothane or anything else without very much effort. So I think it's definitely a thumbs up on doing that 2 layers of genuine elk hide. That's a beautiful, beautiful stitch. So let me, I'm going to replay some of these songs just so we have some background noise. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to do a single layer of genuine cowhide. I'm going to do 2 layers of, this is the genuine cowhide. I'll do a single layer of that, kind of sew down, turn, and come back. Check my shot here. Then I'm going to do 2 layers of protected full grain leather, which is this. And then last but not least, I'm going to do multiple layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. And that'll wrap up our sew-offs on this 1922 Singer Redeye. So let me adjust my shot to get a little bit closer to the presser foot. Unless you're entertained by watching me turn, I think that's probably just about as entertaining. So let me come out to here and you can watch me turn this off, turn the balance wheel, and I'll play the song that we opened up with. And I'll turn my screen around so I can actually see what you're seeing. Oh boy, I better grab some quick coffee. All right, get ready for my speed, folks. Get ready for my speed. Oh, I wish I didn't have a sore on that finger. All right, I'll do it this way. I should have picked a smaller piece of leather. Ah! Oh, I need longer songs, folks. I need longer songs. Oh, we're gonna be going in a circle for a while here. Here we go. And I'll give a shameless plug for Joann Fabrics. I usually always buy my thread at another retailer, and I happened to pop into Joann's to pick up something else, and they had their Americana Quilters thread on sale. 50 cents a spool. How can you beat that? So I bought a ton of Americana Quilters thread from Joann Fabrics. And I really like this stuff. I really do. It doesn't help me sew any faster, but oh well. thread out of the way if I can. Thank goodness for hand cranks for treadles and for electric motors when you have to do it this way, I'm telling you. All my shirts are going to fit tight on my right arm now. Alright, we finally made it around. Holy mackerel. Alright, I finished it just in time. I was trying to clip faster. Okay, so let me zoom in a little bit because you're not going to be able to see it from this distance. And let's take a look at this single layer of genuine cowhide. Again, we're not talking about something super duper thick. We're talking probably about 3 to 4 ounces of genuine leather. But I think again, the stitch quality is the most important factor. No matter what type of leather you're sewing, no matter what the layer thickness is on that leather, you've got to get a stitch quality like this, a stitch that you just go, holy mackerel, that is absolutely gorgeous. I'll come out just a little bit so I don't make you as dizzy, and then I'll zoom back in. But the stitch spacing, the stitch consistency, the overall look of that stitch is just absolutely break-worthy. It's spot on. Again, I would put any of my machines up against a featherweight any day of the week as far as delivering a stitch that is considered to be near perfect. Even from a distance, they're just like, are you serious? What? Spectacular. If we turn it over, the lock stitch evidences the same thing. It shows you a stitch that is absolutely as it should be. The spacing, the consistency, everything about that stitch is absolutely spot on. That's where I cut my thread, right there in the corner there. That little bulb of thread. So once again, it doesn't matter if you have somebody that's bragging about, I can go through this many ounces of leather. If they can't deliver a stitch for the lock stitch and also the top stitch that looks like this, then what's the point? Kind of like Frank Wilson and I were talking about, where you get some of these folks on YouTube and they're totally tearing a machine down to fix an issue that doesn't require that you tear the machine down. It's showmanship. But this right here is not showmanship. This is the proof in the pudding. That's exactly the way that stitch needs to look. So this 1922 Singer 66 also gets a pass, obviously, on this single layer of genuine cowhide. So now we're going to do some full grain leather. This is really raising the stakes up quite a bit. Protected full grain leather is the thick of thick. It's one of the toughest materials next to Italian leather that you can sew. It just is. And we're going to go through 2 layers of it. So let me come out on this shot a little bit so you can watch my turbo finger turning this sucker around again, or my hand, my turbo hand, spinning it around. And I'll give us a little bit more music to entertain you with, because watching me turn the balance wheel manually like this for Peggy Ann's machine is probably not the highest level of entertainment. It might be humorous, but it's not entertainment. Alright, so we got a single layer right now, and this is a little bit thicker too. It's probably about 4 ounces. So now we're up to 2 layers. We're talking about 8 ounces. And for the sake of my hand, I'm going to go down just 1 layer of it. As a matter of fact, it's kind of a shame to waste this, isn't it? Let me cut this in half. maybe what I'll do is I'll fold it like that. That way I can even be lazier. So if I try to fold it like that, that's going to be a little bit of a pickle. Okay, let's be a pickle. I just have to flatten it down a little bit. Alright, let's get it underneath the presser foot. And here we go, 2 layers of protected full grain leather. Obviously this isn't as stable as if it were in a base or a table, but these levelers on this do a pretty good job, they really do. I'm just keeping the bed area balanced a little bit to make it a little bit more stable for me. Ugh. No need to go to the gym today. No need for the gym. Made it just in time. Although I still have to clip my threads, obviously. Again, it really gives you an appreciation for the luxury of a hand crank, a treadle, or the opportunity to have a motorized machine as well. Actually, I'm going to do it like this. I like the look of that even better. I'll put it right in front of the balance wheel. Not the balance wheel, excuse me, the presser foot. I actually know the parts of the machine, but today's a little bit of an off day for me, I think. Okay, so let's zoom in on these now and take a look. This again we're going to be looking at first is our top stitch. What do you think? Oh my Lord. And look at the thickness of that from the side, folks. 2 layers of protected full grain leather turned by my hand, and we absolutely got a stitch that is, it's not even just brag worthy, it's like, are you serious? It doesn't get any better than that, folks. And again, we're talking about, look at the single layer even, take that times 2. Absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. We'll turn it over and let's take a look at that lock stitch now. Actually looks like, when I scrutinize a lock stitch, I look at a couple of things. It's a very good looking lock stitch, but it actually looks like my upper tension worked a little bit harder than it needed to. It looks like it worked a little bit harder than it needed to. It's actually pulled a little bit more taut than it needed to be. But an absolutely gorgeous lock stitch as well in every respect. Just absolutely spectacular. So far, we started out with 2 layers of genuine elk hide. We went to a single layer and boxed genuine cowhide. And now we just did 2 layers of protected full grain leather. And every single one of those has been, in my estimation, an absolute success. An absolute success. So the final test we have for this 1922 Model 66 is to go through, depending on how I can fold this, between 4 to 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. I'm going to see what I can do as far as folding it, and then we'll see what kind of sew off we're going to do. But again, I'll come out on the shot so you can be entertained and also admire the beauty of Peggy Ann's very, very richly restored 1922 Model 66 now. And we will do our final sew off. And of course I've got to have a little bit of music in the background to sew with. And we're just going in circles here, folks. You're not losing your mind. Let me see if I can maybe pick out something a little bit different. Ragtime is my search. Oh my gosh, yeah, there's a lot to pick from. Let's try Jazz Me Blues by Ease Jammy Jams. No, I have no idea. All right, here it is. All right, so we're starting with 2 layers. If I fold it in half, we're up to 4 layers. If I fold it one more time, we're all the way up to 8 layers. All the way up to 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas, folks. Oh, I am really biting off more than I should chew. I'm doing this by hand, folks. I'm doing it by hand. All right, here we go. 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. I will try to keep the machine from tipping over. Here we go. Yeah, I know I'm fast. I know I'm zipping. Put on your safety belts. We're about to hit the sound barrier. We're not even close to the sound barrier. Quite a bit of sewing on this needle. I'm wondering if I should have gone with a new needle. I'm liking the stitching, but when you're sewing with this thickness of leather, you need to be changing out that needle regularly. Otherwise you can get skip stitches and other bad stuff happening. So hopefully I didn't do that. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. So I will put a new needle in before I have Peggy Ann come and pick up her machine, because changing out needles is really, 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 really important. Yeah, we may have had one right in the middle there, and that's just a product of the needle. That needle is a little bit dull. All right, let's zero in on this, and we'll take a look at these stitches a little bit closer. Again, I think I have one area that there was a little bit of a skip stitch on there. Beautiful stitches right there, all the way across. They're consistently beautiful. Right there in the middle. And that again is a product of that needle being a little bit on the dull side, and it skipped one stitch right there in the middle. It didn't complete that cycle properly. And then it decided, wait a second, we're on Scott's workbench. We got to get back to the job and do it correctly. So then it went back and delivered an absolutely perfect stitch all the way across. But it just goes to show you that if you end up cutting a corner a little bit and you don't change out that needle as regularly as it needs to be changed out, no matter how perfect that machine is now, it can just for a brief instant miss a beat and skip a stitch like it just did on Peggy Ann's 66. I might even sew back down again just to see if I can roll the dice and see if we can get away with a perfect line of stitches, and then I'll go ahead and change that needle out before she picks the machine up. So again here, beautiful lock stitch. We get that little tufting that comes through on the machine again, especially when you're going through 8 layers of US Army grade canvas. You're going to get that tufting look, but the stitch spacing, the stitch definition is exactly as it should be. I'm really loving that a lot. So I might, because it'll actually take less time for me to sew another line of stitches than it will be for putting another needle in right now, which I could also do. And I should mention, when you change out the needle on the Model 66, you want to make sure that that flat side is to the right, and in the bobbin case area you want to make sure that that thread is pulling to the left. So it's coming over the top of the bobbin when you drop it in, and if you pull it, it's pulling to the left. Just a little free tip there. Let's see, what do I have? Is that what that's what I just did. Yeah, I like this one. All right, let's sew down one more time. As a matter of fact, I could even do it on a single layer of full grain leather and even make it more of a challenge for this Redeye. And this time I won't zoom in. You've seen me cranking this puppy enough. So let's do a single layer of full grain leather, and we'll see if we can sneak through before I change this needle out as far as getting a gorgeous stitch. And again, I don't want to waste this full grain leather, so I'm going to cut it down a little bit more. All right, here we go. You know what else I'll do is I'll get down halfway, and then I'm going to shorten that stitch to about 20 stitches per inch. I'll go down about halfway where I'm at right now on stitch length, and then we'll shorten it up substantially so you can see the contrast. Getting better at this. I'm almost halfway down. Let's see, a couple more. One more. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shorten that stitch substantially. Here we go. Which means it's going to take me that much longer probably to have to get this going. Come on, Scott, accelerate. I turned it the right way? I don't think I did. Yeah, it's a little shorter. I didn't turn it far enough. It's not that dramatic. And the final stitch. Yay! Yeah, I shortened it a little bit, but not dramatically. And then when I was sewing, I shortened it a little bit more while I was turning the balance wheel. But this thing will lay down just like you saw in this initial test sew off right here. That's cranked way down. We're, like I said, around 20 stitches per inch. But this looks good. And as I predicted, because it's a dull needle issue, and a dull needle can cause intermittent problems, the stitching on this single layer protected full grain leather is absolutely perfect. All right, let's zoom in on this. Oh, we were pretty close already, a little bit off. So here's where I started to adjust it a little bit on the right side and shorten that stitch, but I did it too late. And then as we go across, you can see the stitching gets larger. We started out over here, and then we backed it down a little bit. I backed it down a little bit right here, but not enough. And then I backed it down a lot more, but it was too close to the end. And you can see again, we're looking at about 4 ounces of protected full grain leather. The machine didn't miss a beat. The stitch spacing, the stitch formation is absolutely spot on. And there's no issue with a skip stitch either, because when you get a needle that's starting to get dull, again, I did a fair amount of sewing before I came on camera with this and got lazy. I thought, well, it should be fine. But sometimes when you become complacent, especially when you're on camera, the unexpected will happen, and all of a sudden you'll have a skip stitch that pops up. And here you can look at that lock stitch, and it's absolutely as it should be. The spacing, the formation is absolutely spot on in every way. It's absolutely spectacular. So I definitely give a pass not only to what I would call a spectacularly pretty 1922 Singer Redeye now, but also a pass as far as the stitch quality that this machine just laid down. I'm going to try to do them in order. We started with the genuine elk hide, hoping that you'll be able to see this on the angle. We then did a single layer of genuine cowhide. We then did 2 layers of full grain leather, protected full grain leather. We then did 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas, and last but certainly not least, we did that single layer of protected full grain leather as a confirmation sew off to eliminate the possibility of there being anything mechanically wrong. It's just a matter of getting a needle that's starting to get dull after all that pre-camera and on-camera leather sewing. Schmetz needles are the best in the world, in my opinion, but they will eventually fall victim to when you're sewing all the leather that I did off camera and then sewing this additional leather on camera. So again, 2 layers of genuine elk hide. We then did the single layer of genuine cowhide, and again stitching all the way down absolutely as it should be. We then did the 2 layers of protected full grain leather. Look at that. Absolutely crazy beautiful. And then we did our 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas, and we had that little hiccup in the middle with a skip stitch right about there. And then the machine, again being embarrassed that it had done that on my workbench, picked back up and laid down an absolutely perfect stitch all the way down again. And then without changing the needle out, without doing anything else fancy, we put right away underneath the presser foot again a single layer of protected full grain leather, and even changed the stitch length on the machine, and it laid down a stitch that is absolutely brag worthy in every respect. Absolutely brag worthy. And any of you that think even sewing a single layer of protected full grain leather is easy and you can do it on your machine, especially if you bought that machine at one of the local retailers and it's a plastic piece of junk. There, I said it. It's a plastic piece of junk. Give this a try, and you'll probably be calling that retailer and saying, I'd like to return my machine. It's not making good sounds anymore. So I'm very impressed with this Model 66, this 1922, that I had an opportunity to take through a major transformation. And I would be remiss if I didn't end this premiere by coming off the tripod and getting a little bit closer to Peggy Ann's 1922 Singer Model 66. Again, I'm not going to put it up against Brad's Model 66 Redeye that I fully restored. I took it all the way down to bare metal, brand new paint, brand new decals, brand new clear coat. This one was a lot more simple approach to trying to bring back most of that beauty of the machine and get it back to a point where it's still a jaw dropper, but it's not quite at the level of Brad's machine. That's my disclaimer as we get ready to come off the tripod and get closer to Peggy Ann's 1922 Singer Redeye. And of course I've got to put a little bit more fun music on. Here we go. I gotta move these so off so that they're not blocking the bed. I was upside down there for a second. That was kind of exciting. Well, I have to say this has been quite a handful, but it's been worth every effort to get Peggy Ann's machine back to a point where it's got most of that beauty restored. It's a head turner and it sews absolutely like a dream. So the lesson to be learned is the 1920s were pretty fabulous. A lot of great things happened. And again, if you remember, before November comes into play, this is the month that celebrates the 117th year since the Singer 66 Redeye was introduced. 117 years ago! Crazy! So again, Peggy Ann, your machine is all set. She's looking good. She's sewing fabulous. And thanks for the opportunity of being of service. Keep the machines coming, folks. And again, watch soon for a premiere because of our 6,000 subscriber milestone. God bless you guys.